Okay, so the COP for at least a little while, because you know me, I keep changing things. So I'm not going to say for this point on, but at least for the next few sessions, I'm going to turn it into this kind of flipped classroom approach, asking questions. So right now it's just been, I've been saying I just want to do Q&A at the sessions, but uh, I am going to add a little structure to where I say, here's something you can learn this week, and then maybe focus on questions on that. Flipped classroom is the idea that instead of lecturing to everybody, it came out of a college. I know Harvard promoted it. I'm not quite sure that's where it was invented. I think it was there too. The professor decided instead of him giving the lectures all the time and then having homework assignments, he would give recordings of the lectures to his students, let them watch them, and then at the classroom they would work out things together. And that's a one good way of learning. We've done a little something like that, a kind of a cross in the ACE program, or the Amplio University, as I'm calling the whole thing now, where most of our sessions aren't presentations anymore, but are co-creation sessions, which we've done here a little bit in answering questions. So this session is going to be mostly Q&A, but I've had a couple of insights last night. It's kind of why I didn't get like I was up a lot. I was thinking about this session, and one of the things we were supposed to talk about, or we said we'd talk about, but I'm going to wait to see if Thomas is here since he's the one who brought it up, is more about Kinevin. And in a side conversation in the ACE program, I realized I may have misstated what I meant about it. I still hold true to the fact that it's better to look at the relationships, but I wanted to be very clear that we do have to acknowledge there is complexity out there. I talk about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. You don't need to explain what complexity is to people. We all know about it. We've all faced cases where we thought we were looking at the right thing and there was some combination of other effects that impacted us. So we know what complexity is. The question is, how do you go about looking at it? And I was thinking about this in preparation, and one of the things I dislike about the way most people, in particular the Scrum and the Kinevin camp, and they're kind of joined in this, one of the things I dislike about it is they use the idea of complexity as a disempowering thing. Oh, it's complex and I can't see what's present. Um, Ellie Goldratt talks about this to some extent. In fact, here, I'll put this up here. Got some quotes. I know I've made a special page just about, I know you can't read that yet, don't worry. Just there's quite a few. In fact, there's one I want to read, but well, I guess I thought I had it up there and I don't. So let me just go to Goldratt directly. I know which ones I want to talk about. Um, There's the one right here. The first and most profound obstacle is that people believe that reality is complex and therefore are looking for sophisticated explanations for complicated solutions. Do you understand how devastating this is? And the reason is he follows it with the hardest thing to do is to struggle to find an answer to a problem. And we believe that there is a high chance that it doesn't have an answer. It is so easy to give up. If you're not sure there's really another effect, then you stay inside your box for safety. This is where he comes up with inherent simplicity. This is a complete flip on complexity. He's not saying the world's not complex. He's saying that underneath the world, there are things we can do to see what's going on. This is the idea of inherent simplicity. If we dive deep enough, we'll find there are very few elements at the base. The root causes, which through cause and effect connection are governing the whole system. And yes, there are some things we can't see, but we discover these as we go. So I admit I was thinking about this last night in preparation for this, and I just got the realization that the biggest challenge with Agile, in fact, I'm kind of tempted to read something, and maybe I will. Okay, this is going to be odd. I've done this stuff like this before, so I'll do it again. Because this really is what it kind of says to me is like, where do we come from first? Like, what foundational belief system do we have? And I think that this is fundamental. And when Agile came out, it gave us some guidance. But what's happened in the Agile space now is there's more of a you can't do than what you can. And we have to free ourselves from this. And yet, this was something that happened this morning. I saw another Agile proponent talking about a problem in product development and how to fix it. This is the big issue in Agile. We create problems and then talk about how to solve them instead of figuring out how not to create them in the first place. I mean, it really is remarkable to me. The lack of systems thinking and the vast incompleteness of the manifesto and our popular frameworks in the pursuit of simple causes this. Oh, I should say that. I left the verb out. I do that sometimes. I heard it in my head loud as clear, clear as day. I don't know why you don't see it on the paper. Causes this. We should be striving for sufficient. I keep seeing things. Part of this was
I'm sorry, do you mean the pursuit of simplicity
yes,
or the pursuit of
pursuing
simple
simplicity
solutions?
pursuing simplicity is not a good thing. Not making it overcomplicated is a better thing. Yes, thanks for asking that, Ryan. In fact, why don't I add that? Why don't I add that? Oh, yeah. Well, I say simple because people are always talking about simple, but let's clarify that. The pursuit of simplicity causes this. We should not pursue, we should be striving for sufficient. Now, what causes, I'll just leave this like it is, but I'll change it to simplicity. What caused this, what triggered this, not what caused this, what triggered this was somebody posting about how sometimes you have to remove features and things like that. I'm thinking, oh my God, you shouldn't be writing features you don't need in the first place, not figuring out how to remove them. You see this all the time. Oh, simple. Let's not have this. Let's not have that. This is where minimum valuable increments are so valuable. You don't overbuild when you build like that, but you do overbuild when you talk about sprint increments, when you talk about epics. The whole Agile space is based on a poor requirements management, and then everybody's trying to figure out how to fix it. And this actually made me had a realization about another way to talk about double and single loop learning. Okay. So this
Can
is
we
I'm sorry. Yeah,
can we
keep interrupting
I was
me
gonna
with
say
questions.
no,
That's
I was
great,
gonna say
right?
I'm curious what the room is receiving from your first blast there. If
Oh, good.
there's any I mean, I've got a whole thing in complexity. I mean, this is your thing, but um does everyone agree, with what Al's putting out there here?
More important, do you disagree? And let me know what the disagreement is.
Yeah, well, that's
I know it's the
Which
same question, but if you're kind of, well, I sort
that's
of
a
agree,
that
they'll
that's a
be
better
quiet.
question.
If I
That's a better
sort of
question.
disagree, then they'll talk more about it. I want to hear any kind of disagreement.
Andrew looked like you were landing here.
no, I was just which part were you in particular picking up on in terms of whether we were agreeing or disagreeing?
Well, I
Yeah.
guess I just wanted to just take the opportunity to make sure I had that everyone was here with what's going, because I guess I feel when we get here, I'm I'm like it's overwhelming to go with what you're putting out there, Al. I'm just trying to make sure that we're getting
So
what you're putting out.
Ryan, first of all, we had a conversation last week that's kind of a background here that you're not aware of, that where we talked about. I'm really glad you're bringing things up. So we talked about that you look at complex systems not as I'm in this domain, that domain, or that domain, but you look at the relationships that are present in whatever domain you're in at the moment. And that looking at those relationships gives you more power. And that's Goldrat's view of these relationships are the inherent simplicity of what's causing things to go on. But why don't you ask a question? If I'm overwhelming you, why don't you ask what's not being grasped?
Yeah, I guess that's there. So I want to make sure the biggest challenge with Agile. Okay, so Agile proponent, again, names shall remain safe here. Talking a problem project, what kind of problem, how to fix it? A problem with this particular interaction between people or
Okay,
understanding, or
great
is it
question.
that there's that the complex, okay, I'm gonna go here, the complicated dead domain of things that have static relationships, is that the problem? Do we understand, again, whoever the we is there an understanding of this particular problem
Okay.
in that? And so that's kind of where I'm going. And
Yeah, no, great. This is good because this gives me an opportunity to state what I'm saying more clearly, which I clearly have not. Okay. Um, I'm not
Well,
really worried about what the problem is. I'm worried about what is our attitude about the problem.
yeah, and that's what I mean, that's why this didn't set off any alarm bells for me, because it actually doesn't matter what the problem is. It's about how you understand and interact with the situation of discovering you have a problem,
Yeah,
or how you come up with the treatment options for how you have a problem. And if you the I mean, and we actually last week had a big session about this where Al kind of came up with what he thinks is the underlying theory for a number of different ways to approach systems-based problem treatment, discovery, and whatever. But I mean, I think that you either it's down to whether you believe in systems as your go-to tool to figure out where things are in the world and the way they ought to be, or you don't.
yeah,
And you come up with, you have a fixed set of views of the world, then you're not really looking at systems, you're looking at those views. And when you run out of those views, then you're kind of screwed.
yeah. Yeah, that's good. And so what I'm trying to say is that in fact, maybe here's one other way of saying it, and then I'll go back to here. So after I wrote that, I thought of this. Scrum has us use inspect and adapt to solve your problems. This is an example of single loop learning. Oh, something happened. How do I prove it? Lean uses plan, do, study, act to both solve problems and adjust how you're working to avoid creating them in the first place. This is an example of double loop learning. Okay. Amplio incorporates how to learn faster. I actually get this from Lean too. If you were to give Lean is about one thing, it's about learning more than anything else. That's what's underneath everything. Now, by the way, I know you are in big with, Neil's, how do you say his last name? Flailing?
flagging.
Flagging. Yeah. Okay. This is extremely consistent with his work. Okay. And, his organized for complexity is kind of saying, how do we create our system so that we can deal with complexity instead of being at the effect of complexity? So that's one of the things I love about his work is he's not out on the ship in a storm complaining about how windy and wet it is. He's doing something about making the ship so it can handle the storm. And you don't see this. And I know that Scrum is not equal to Agile, but it strongly influenced it. We create problems and then talk about how to solve them. Most every LinkedIn post that talks about Agile and Scrum is Scrum consultants conveying, yeah, second busy, conveying how to solve a problem, and they're not looking at how what they're proposing is causing those problems. And this lack of systems thinking and the vast incomplete, this is what I copied the last couple of lines here. Yeah, Abizi.
Yeah, I think I want to agree with what Al is saying in that if we focus on looking at how to like talk about the relationship, we'll be able to eliminate complexity because we're like addressing the issue before they occurs. than, so it's still taking that system thinking approach where you are looking at the relationship that could potentially lead to complexity and you are trying to address it. Like Ellie Goldratt said that the theory of inherent simplicity. So I think I align with that school of thought.
Yeah, I would rather use the word reduce the amount of complexity. I don't know you ever
Okay,
get rid of
okay.
it, but what you said is right. I just kind of trying to be a little more precise. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And by the way, it's not a coincidence that Snowden has discounted systems thinking. I mean, that's one of the things he came out after I stopped talking to him. I saw on another post he lambasted Goldratt, said Goldratt wrote his stuff before complexity thinking came out, which was absolutely not true. I actually showed the timing of it, but he's the one who kind of put complexity thinking at odds with system thinking, not me. And I wrote this post kind of defending Goldratt. I remember that. And then he said, well, he was still right, even though he had the timing wrong because Goldratt um, never put in footnotes or something. And I was like, well, you don't put in footnotes for stuff you don't agree with. I mean, he was aware of complexity and he agreed with it, but the whole approach to it. But anyway, the point is, what we need to be doing is as we're going around learning how to get better, we also need to be, I realize this was kind of the idea, and I'm going to have to change this diagram, which I've had forever. Basically, we must learn how, here we solve the cause of the problem. And here we solve the problem. This is the difference between single and double loop learning. And, again, part of the mindset of Scrum is, well, Scrum doesn't help you solve your problems. It just exposes your problems. So there's exposing the problems. This might be the other thing. There's 3 levels here. There is exposing the problem, fixing the problem, stop causing the problem. Learning how to do this faster. And I'm just tired of all of this being held down and being held back and buying into all this, oh, woe is us, it's so difficult. To me, it's just a big victim thing. And I was actually getting that, I think, is the biggest difference between how I approach all of this. Now, I don't want to say, let me say how I want to say this. A lot of anybody can take this attitude. Okay. So I'm not going to say it's special that like I can do it and nobody else can. No, not at all. But it is an attitude I take. It's an attitude I know a lot of you take. But it's not an attitude that's generally out there and is not an attitude that's encouraged in the Agile space. And I think that's a problem. And that is the biggest problem. That's why I actually do believe that. That's why I said, maybe the biggest challenge with Agile is this issue that we will solve problems instead of stop creating the problems. When I see somebody post that, oh, you sometimes have to take away as if this is this revelation instead of why are you in this situation in the first place? I haven't ever done an actual survey, but I bet if I did, I would find that 60 to 80% of the stuff out there is solving problems that don't even need to be caused in the first place. And that's what's disturbing. Okay, so comments on that. Do you see that as well, or is it just my weird way of looking at the world? Because I know I have a weird way of looking at the world.
Well, I think one of the, I think it's interesting and worthwhile maybe to talk about some of the drivers behind that attitude, because I think if you if you are in the space where you think you need to learn and be an expert in something, and you have been told, or you have drunk the Kool-Aid, or you have bought into the fact that that thing is sufficient for what it is you're trying to do, then your interest in questioning it or challenging it is going to be quite low,
Yes,
because you trust the framework.
that's right.
And framework is flawed, you're going to think it's you, not the framework. Whereas if you really come at it from the perspective of, you know, everything has limits, and if I am hitting a problem, my normal approach to the problem is figuring out and looking at the larger systems, then you're going to come at it and everything is sort of fair game and on the table. Your behavior, the framework, you know, state or ability or whatever it is, and you're going to be more open to external ideas or thinking or adapting. Whereas if you're told, no, the framework is right, the framework is right, framework, follow the framework, it's your problem, the framework is fine, then you're not going to want to think like this, because you've bought into the Kool-Aid, and then that proves that you're wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Susan.
And along the same lines, if the organization has the culture of fear as opposed to a culture of
That's
learning,
right.
then it says in the framework, this is what we do.
Yes.
And so what interest do I have? It also, it reduces people's sense of agency. So they're not even, not only will they not see things, they won't even look for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This. I believe if you make the shift yourself, and I put on the, like, I have several of these that are, I've got in this column. This is like what I call myths, and I did make this belief system was not sourced in Agile. It was sourced in the Scrum aspect that has now become Agile in a sense. I remember what XP, the attitude of XP and the energy that was present. And I've said this before, but I'm starting to really get how it's the real problem. Agile was created by innovators, by early adopters and innovators. And it was more early adopters than innovators when it came out. And we were people out there trying to solve problems and knowing we could solve problems. And it has now gone into something else. And I've said this, a lot of people have said this. So, crossing the chasm, we crossed the chasm, but Agile required a certain can-do attitude. And I guess I'm saying this because I think I'm not saying that you have to do this, because I'm not going to tell people how they have to live their life. But if you don't do this, there are going to be consequences. And that may be fine, because some people don't like to jump out like this. I have a sense that most of you here like to jump out like this because that's why you're here. But it's also an acknowledgement. I'll take it as two levels of what Susan said. I'll riff off that. One is that she's absolutely right. If there's an unsafe environment, you're going to seriously lock it down. And another one is some people really like comfort. They don't like to stretch where they are. And that's what I love about Goldrat's comment. A comfort zone has less to do with control and more to do with knowledge, meaning we don't have the knowledge, so we stay in a comfortable level and that we have a problem.
I think it's also kind of interesting that what I've observed, and I mean, I don't follow this the way you guys do, but what I've observed is the people who kind of are the ones who live and die by the manifesto are the ones who are so locked into the way that Scrum should work. And if you believe that sentence that says people over process, and then you're using Scrum as a replacement crutch, isn't that the process that you were theoretically, raging against the machine
Yeah,
to
there
avoid?
is an irony there. Yeah, Ryan.
I lost. I was listening to Andrew.
Oh, okay. Well, when it comes back, just jump in. So what I guess I'm saying is and there are many ways of doing this. But where I'm coming from is a particular personal characteristic and trait. I'm going to do something I've done once before. I was at a conference where it was an Agile conference in Denver. I can remember that. Or Colorado anyway. I think it was Denver. Yeah, Agile Denver. And I remember reading Toad and Frog in the Garden, a child's story. And have I ever read that here? Maybe I should read that here one day, but I know I did it at the ACE. It's about making things harder than they need to be. And I can remember the reaction of the crowd or a couple of, I was reading a child's story at the Agile conference because back then I was a lot more serious than I am now. But I woke up last night in the middle of the night. This happens to me sometimes well, I wake up most every night because when you hit 71, almost 72 next week, actually, you tend to do that, or that's one thing that might happen. But usually I go right back to bed because I'm used to it. But last night I couldn't. And I decided to just, sometimes I get up and I read something. There's this wonderful book, by the way. I mean, if I could own only one book, and I don't have this as a list. I hadn't thought about this in a while, but I was downstairs drinking some tea, and I was looking at this book. And I said, oh, I haven't read that in forever. I've got it on like a section for books. And I'll show you the book. And if you're interested, I'm not going to do it now because I don't want to have to go look for it, how I found this. I did find, it took me about a half an hour to find. This is an amazing book. Okay, The Well of Being. I mean, it is the most remarkable book I've ever read in my life. And it's kind of meditative. It's a children's book for adults. It's really big and thick, but it takes like maybe 20 minutes to read the whole thing because it's picture book. And if you're an artist, it's amazing. He takes famous paintings, which sometimes some of them I don't even recognize, and he throws them into the whole thing. But this is a way to get to our kind of your soul, so to speak. And there is a place to get it. Everybody's out of stock. Everybody's out of stock. I mean, I checked every book publisher there is, but you can go to the source. There's this place that sells it for $55 and it's autographed. Apparently, I just bought 5 more. I tend to give these away to people because who knows about this book, but it's really brilliant. Anyway, it got me thinking. I'm gonna ask for your indulgence for 10 minutes here because I'm gonna do something I've never done in the ACE program and I've never done in the community of practice, but somehow it feels appropriate. It keeps begging at my back of my head to do it. And when I keep getting something like that, I tend to try to believe it. So here, my cat wants to be able to see it while I read it. So I'll put her up here. So I wrote this in the middle of the night. I'm going to read it to you. Okay. A rambling by my soul in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, I awaken to the crowd of my thoughts. Beleaguered, I listen to the cacophony, all yelling at me, yelling with me, yelling. Above all the noise, I hear nothing, but beneath all the noise, I hear quiet, a deep quiet, a wondrous quiet. The real problem with Agile started out as breaking free of constraints, as a path to better ways, doing things in small steps. Check where you are. The sky is the limit. There is nothing in it that I can't do. But somewhere along the way, we were told what limited us. We believe this because all of our life we've been told there's only so much you can do. And we believed it. But some voices said otherwise. One I remember said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you are right. Lou Holtz, the legendary college football coach, told us ability is what you're capable of doing. Motivation determines what you do. Attitude determines how well you do it. There is no passion to be found playing small and settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. Nelson Mandela. I don't believe in the limitations others put on me, simply because they have not found freedom for themselves. No one can do something until they can. That includes me. We can do more when we believe we can than when we believe we can't. There are no limits to our understanding, except those that we put on ourselves. We learned to do this as children, to protect ourselves from overreaching the behavior our parents put on us. They meant well, but their chains of protection then, possibly providing a safety then, make us unsafe now. The world is what we make it, but too often we let the world make us. Freedom does not come from the outside, but from within us. Because we say we can, We don't ask for permission. If we need permission, it's only from us, not from anyone else, not from outside. No matter what they say, it's up to us to be free to live. That's our choice. That's your choice. That's my choice. I choose to choose. I invite you to choose, but only you can choose to choose. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative or creation, there is one elementary truth, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would otherwise never have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man would have believed could have come his way. I've learned a deep respect for one of Gooder's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. That's Murray, the Scottish Himalayan expedition. Never forget that you are magic. And I don't know, I just think that's what we need to have if you want to make a difference. So thanks for the indulgence. I know you weren't expecting me to read you a poem I wrote.
Pretty awesome, Mel.
Yeah. So is your assertion here that it is a limiting belief of agile thinking, of what has become of thought leadership, all that stuff, is that is the acceptance that people are limited and that they're not that you're not okay. You don't have the capability or
I
some kind of a theory. I got a theory X belief about people.
Well, my
Instead,
belief is that we all have these inner demons and we have to overcome them, and Agile plays up to them. That's, I guess, how I would say it. I've spent my whole life trying to overcome it, and you don't overcome it as much as you learn to live within it. Some people are truly free. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I believe that's a big thing. And, you just look at these things that Scrum proclaims and which are bought into by non-Scrum folks. Being based on empiricism is sufficient. That's like no theory. I can't understand. No, you can understand. You must follow it to understand. No, maybe I can understand right up front. Yes, maybe I have to do it to truly be proficient in it, but you can understand conceptually what it is, and you go in a tight loop. That's the idea. You don't learn a lot of stuff and then practice a long time, and then it's not just quick delivery, it's quick thinking, a quick thinking loop, a little theory, a little doing, a little theory, a little doing, a little theory, a little doing, a little theory, a little doing. But at some point, you don't even know where you started. It doesn't matter where you start. It's that loop. It's good that it's simple. You've left stuff out. No. Which is simpler, a Tesla or a Model T? Well, it depends. Model T's simpler built. It's not simpler to use. This focus on building, on construction, comes from XP, which was fine, except 90% of the people understand what they meant. And why do I say that? Because Kent and Ron Jeffries said that. I mean, I saw it, and then they reflected it. It said all other things being equal, not go for simple. In other words, if you have this as effective as this, but this is simpler, go for simpler. But people forgot that if this is as effective. So people started looking at fewer things, fewer classes, fewer methods, fewer this, fewer that. Being purposely incomplete makes sense. No. Getting the right information at the right time makes sense. Exposing impediments. They actually say this in the manifesto. And Ken has talked about it. Why not help me solve my problems? You can't see cause and effect, so you have to experiment. This is the whole case study I did a couple sessions ago. I have the experience of when I understood the customer and when I had a process for looking at the value stream, that I did not write stuff that was not needed. Now, this did not mean I could predict everything out there. Did not mean I could predict everything out there. It meant I took little steps to keep my understanding going. But you know what? Nobody asked me how I did it. They deny you could do it. They ignore the things. It's like Winston Churchill, he says, sometimes men stumble across the truth, but most of the time they pick themselves up and keep on going as if nothing had happened. That's the Agile space. Right.
I want to challenge this as a little bit incomplete.
Yes, I appreciate the challenge and keep going.
So cause and effect can be seen when there's static elements, right? You have static elements and static relationships, and you
No,
observe
doesn't have to
those.
be static. I don't think it has to be
Well,
static.
no,
Keep
I
going.
so there's
I'm sorry, keep
a
going.
the static relationship that when a force impacts an object, again, I'm not a physicist,
Okay.
so please challenge me on that.
Yeah.
When a force impacts an object, there's a static relationship. We can predict that much more accurately in
when
that
there's
domain.
cause and effect.
Right.
That's right.
When there are human beings who are inherently unpredictable, unreliable in many ways, and ununderstandable because I cannot get inside your head. I cannot hear your listening. I can only assume that.
That's right.
And when that assumption is there, then you have to have a whole different set, a mindset, a worldview, a set of beliefs that say, okay, when I have observed the situation that this piece of stuff, that these elements of a piece of software that react in a certain set of rules and all this kind of stuff that we can predict accurately. Okay, is that where the problem is, or is it with some misunderstanding, some story people that are telling themselves that cause surprise?
Well,
right. So that's I would say there's a distinction there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you filling it in because actually what you said relates to two things. One thing it relates to is that people are unpredictable. So I'm going to talk about people are unpredictable in the way they work. And I agree completely. That's why you need quick feedback because weird things can happen. But you don't want to lose when you have things that you can understand. I wouldn't use the word static, but I wouldn't say understandable. But I know what you meant. That's right. Now, when it comes to features, the way you do that is you have to talk to enough people to understand where they're coming from. And that was that case study where I talked about that 6 steps. Come from value, where people are coming from, what their value streams are, so you can just slip it in and use their motivation to want to do it. So I'm not sure if you were talking about finding out what customers want, or to find out how to improve process, or both, or was it anything involving
It
people?
depends on the context. I mean, I
Okay.
want to hear what Andrew has to say
Yeah,
about
just
that.
one last comment. Just this will be fast. So if people are involved, unpredictability is present. I agree completely. Yeah, Andrew.
Just want to kind of throw a couple of things in terms of cause and effect and producer product and all this. So cause and effect only exists if you control the environment. If you understand and the environment is the same, it is deterministic because the cause is guaranteed probability of 1 to create the effect. The problem is most of the environment we have changes, and so you can't use cause and effect. You got to use producer product. This is what Acuff talks about all the time in all of his books. And I can never remember which one of the people he learned from came up with this, but they basically came up with the producer product relationship. So, you don't get an oak tree if you throw the acorn in the ocean. It's not a cause for the oak tree. You got to have a bunch of stuff together, and that's.
What, did I lose you? Oh, he looks like he froze.
Yeah.
One of the things he's saying, I'll wait till he unfreezes, and I agree with him. It's cause and effect is dependent upon the context you're in. So acorns don't create oak trees except in certain situations. He's probably there. He is. Yeah, you
Sorry,
froze up.
Zoom didn't like what I was saying, apparently.
No, apparently not.
You've been canceled.
Zoom has canceled me. So anyway, when you're in an environment with people, yes, you can't completely predict their behavior, but you can understand what can be done because humans react in a fairly predictable set of ways, and it's about the outcome you want to achieve. And so you can plan on whether you achieve that outcome or not, and what you can do about it, because all you can do is control your own activity and behavior, which is the way you respond to events and the things you decide to do. So if you put all these things together, it means that you don't have to rely on empiricism and observation and cause and effect and poke it and see what happens and just stand there completely unprepared. What it means is that if the more you understand about the environment you're in, the dynamics, human behavior, psychology, and you can put all these things on the table related to the outcome you want to achieve, then you can come up with a very small number of contingency scenarios that you can plan on, and you can use that. So you can predict, because you have predicted how you're going to respond to the situations that you believe are going to manifest. Will you get them all? Maybe not, but will you get, if you really understand the objective you want to achieve and the implications of what it takes to get there and why you need that, then you can actually do pretty well. The more you understand the systems at play and the behavior of the elements in them, even if they are animate systems with independent thought and behavior. So that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, this comes back, I think, to this idea of the obstacle is the way. So we'd like that we could see everything that's going on, but we notice what's in our way. People are unpredictable. We notice that it's not straight cause and effect because context matters. Acorns don't go into oak trees unless they're in the ground and have certain conditions. So at first that looks like, oh my God, we can't do anything. It's overwhelming. That's what Goldrat's saying. But what I'm saying is no, that what that means is those are the things now in our way. And we have to pay attention to those things. And if we pay attention, we can overcome them. And is it easy? Not necessarily. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying that that if you take the attitude you can overcome them, then in fact you can overcome them. And that's really the key to this whole thing.
Yeah. And I think that this is really why people get so wrapped up in complexity, because until you see those producer product relationships to the point where you have enough confidence that you can respond and exist and do whatever it is you need to do. I mean, this is the fundamental basis of everything I do in security right now. This is why I've redefined security as the confidence you're going to have the outcome that you want and all of this, because if you don't understand anything about the environment you're in, you're overwhelmed, it's complex, it's chaotic, I don't know what the hell to do, nothing makes sense. But the more you can identify the producer product relationships and the systems and the groups of things that behave in certain ways and the options of behavior that you have, and the more that you have taxonomies to apply to, kind of look at the world and see if it fits the model that you have, the more of those you have, it's not complex anymore, because you've got it. You are prepared. You know what is likely to happen. And so, but you know what's likely to happen because you understand the systems and the relationships that are involved. But you're never going to get there if you're not looking for them. And I think that's the fundamental thing behind what I was saying is, if I don't believe in systems, or if I believe that I don't need systems because I can just poke it and sit there for 18,000 years and figure it out if it, maybe, then you're going to get stuck and everybody else is going to leave you behind and you're going to wonder what the hell happened.
Yeah. And that to me is the underlying fundamental difference. It's one of the, yes, just a second. That's why in our book, the first thing we did is we talked about the attitude of an effective coach, the being an effective value coach. The idea is that I'm responsible for figuring this out, that I'm capable of figuring this out. And I don't know, it just really hit me last night. And I guess part of my frustration of what's going on in this world is we just feel we're not capable. That's victim thinking. And I guess that's something I'm wired not to accept. Anyway, Susan.
was just going to say, I had a number of gigs at a large financial services firm that was highly siloed before they decided to get into Scrum. And they would, in order to get some problem solved across a large group of silos, they'd have a whole bunch of people on a conference call, and it would take an inordinately long period of time, but they were all focused on what needed to be done. My last gig with them, I was brought in as a Scrum Master for a small group, and what everybody was focused on was things like, well, you didn't put it in the story, or it does exactly, it was the old works as designed kind of thing. Everybody had shields up and wanted to do things, and they were not listening to other groups or trying to understand what the whole through line was on something. They just wanted to say that I did my part and I don't understand what your problem is.
Yeah. Yeah. This is again, part of how people are. I mean, this is maybe the real issue for me, is that not everybody's going to be interested in doing what I'm talking about. And I have to acknowledge that and not judge that. Anyway, Ryan.
Yeah, Susan, I want to go into that just a little bit more. When you observe that behavior in those folks, the blaming behavior and all that kind of stuff, did you have the authority to take an approach to intervene in those behaviors and say, oh, again, privately, why might you be thinking this way? What's the impact of your context on you, so that causes you to behave in this way? I mean, I have some theories and assumptions about that, but I'm wondering what you observed in that situation when that was happening.
It's a very peculiar company, and they think they're working by consensus, but what they do is they have meetings in which nothing ever happens. And so it's just a bunch of word salad thrown at the wall. And after a year and a half, I couldn't take it any longer, so I left. But I strongly suspect they're doing the same things now.
So to me, this brings up maybe a bigger issue. I'm not sure I'm up for this, a bigger issue, but it's worth at least mentioning. So you have two issues. One issue we've been talking about today has been this one of people and the attitude you can take as an individual. And it seems to me that's what I'm working on right now. I will admit that's what I'm trying to have the impact on. Then the question is, when you think about that, when you realize that there's a minority of people who are doing this, and see, I mean, organizations have momentum. There's like the culture that's been around. So if most of your people don't have the attitude we've been talking about, then how to shift that is difficult. How to shift it given the momentum seems virtually impossible. And I don't know, maybe it is, but I'm not gonna take that it is impossible, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna go up for that task. So that just seems, I would rather impact individuals and let them go up for the task, I suppose. The issue, though, that comes to me as you were talking, Susan, is there's no question that Scrum and Agile has added value. I mean, there's no question about it. The breaking down silos, the notion of iterations, the notion of whole teams. But we've moved a little bit, run into problems because we had some insufficiency in getting there. And what we want to do is shed the constraints that we now have taken on and keep moving forward. And I guess for me, it's simply a question of continuing being a voice for that's a possibility. Anyway, yeah, I didn't really intend this session to be this philosophical conversation about things, but I actually think this is something that's needed. I really think this has been a good session. And Ryan, I think this is the first time you've been in, but just so some people may not be aware of this, Ryan is in the Amplio University He came in a few weeks ago, and he does the weekend Amplio sessions with me on Friday mornings. And so, but I appreciate you being at this session and contributing, even if you haven't been at kind of much of the others. But yeah, you look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, I'm sorry to derail that if there's a particular desire or
No, I was
neither
done.
one from the group here. I also wanted to say, because this week is, I think the Friday is off, and there's an off week this week. I think you and I had talked about having an open mic session for
Yeah,
anyone who wants to join or ask questions or anything like that. If you want to join, you want to be on camera and riff with Al and I about something in particular, this is the week to do it. It will probably, again, I think we're developing the pattern of what this is
that's
going to
right. We
look
still
like.
are creating.
Yeah, so if you want to do that, you're welcome to do it. If there's someone you know that you'd like to see talk, we can poke at them or they can poke at us. Feel free to invite them and give them my email address or LinkedIn, whatever. And I'd be happy to send them an invite to join the stream, as you are
Yeah.
all welcome to do.
Yeah, we need to set this up on the site so we can get that out. I can send an email about it too. That's good. Okay. Well, I guess I've said my piece. Any closing comments or observations about this session? I know it's a bit different than normal.
Well, I would
Okay,
say that oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, Susan.
I would say that by relying on user stories as the sole form of requirements, that a lot of Scrum organizations shoot themselves in the foot because
Yeah.
Deeper requirements can't be captured that way.
Yeah, that's an example of where people are talking about user stories and the problems with user stories, and nobody steps back to ask, are user stories even good? This is part of that contextual thing. User stories were great at XP. At XP, you had a customer who was right there with you. That was one of the practices of XP, is you had an ever-present customer to talk with. It's not where we are now. Anyway, busy.
Well, your last statement introduces something else. If you are not using user stories, how do you recommend we capture requirements? But my initial thought was to Andrew. I kept hearing him saying producer product relationship. I didn't quite understand what you mean by that. So if you would explain that, I will appreciate.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Okay, no, I said Andrew
Oh, you
earlier
were
was
talking
talking
to
about
Andrew. Yeah, let Andrew do it. Yeah, very good. Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm talking about is producer product. So it was developed because the thing about cause and effect and reductionist thinking and the whole way we do things is all kind of the scientific method and the scientific approach. And as Akoff points out in one of his great talks that I love, from mechanistic to systemic thinking, what is the thing where scientists work called? It's called a laboratory. Why is it called that? Because the environment is fixed. We try to do everything to take away the environment so that we can build models of the way the world works without an environment. But the problem is that's not the way the world works. So cause and effect in a context. So if I take a match and I light it in the air, it's going to work. I know what that is. It's deterministic. But if I take that same match and try to strike it in a vacuum, it's not going to work. Doing the same cause, but I'm not having the same effect because the environment is different. And so the realization was that we need some other way to talk about the problems and situations we need to deal with in the real world that include the environment versus the environment-free sort of models that we've created for ourselves in terms of cause and effect. There's other people who call this non-deterministic cause and effect, but that kind of is like saying, I won't use my
Okay.
favorite.
I was thinking that eliminates the aspect of coming from the consumer's perspective or the customer's perspective if you are focusing on product and producer relationship.
No, this is more abstract and fundamental than actually with a customer. That's more of a customer supplier relationship, the way I talk about it. But producer product is basically, it's just like cause and effect, except it takes account for the environment, and there's more than one producer
Okay.
to have an effect. So like our oak tree
Oh.
example, it's got to have the seed, it's got to have water, it's got to have sunlight, it's got to have all those.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you want the product of an oak tree, then you have a bunch of producers that all have to exist in at least a minimum amount, and you can figure that out. And that is the system of production of
Okay.
oak tree. So
Yeah.
this gives you a way. So whenever you're talking about, applying Goldratt and theories of constraints and looking for the root cause, well, sometimes because you've got to deal with the environment, there is not a single cause. There's maybe the one you notice first, but if you apply full systems thinking to it, then you're actually going to find that there's a number of different producers that create or contribute to that outcome that you're talking about. And you need to look through them all and decide which ones are actually relevant or possible for you to address. And it's just because it's non-deterministic.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, was that close it then? Okay, well, we'll go back. So we'll have the Friday. I'll send out a note. Yeah, that's a good to have a covenant open mic on Friday. And then next week you go back to the normal schedule. And even though the Amplia University kind of takes a week off every 4 weeks, I've decided the ACOP is just going to keep going every Tuesdays because that's easier to think about it that way. And it still serves the purpose of lightening the load every 4 weeks. So take care. Have a good week. And I put in the chat, by the way, where you can get that book. Okay, it's $59. That's pricey, but it's my favorite book. It's more personal than anything else, but I definitely would look into that. Great gifts too, by the way. Talk to you later then. Take care.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.